Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 12 entitled Judgment Coming. And our key idea this week is faith in Jesus determines our eternal destiny. And we're going to be in Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, and then skipping to 36 through verse 43. We're going to start by talking about divides and dividing. We're going to be looking at choosing Jesus or Satan. But before we get to that, let's talk about divides that we are confronted with daily. It could be candidates for political campaigns. It could be decisions between what you want to do versus what your spouse wants to do. It might be something small as where to go for lunch. But what are some divides that we struggle with or face daily? So this could be a discussion about sports and who is the best basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan or LeBron James, broccoli, yes or no. There are a lot of different things in our life where we have to choose one thing or another. We have to be on one side or the other. And so we're going to be seeing through a parable, which we know what a parable is. A parable is a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. We're going to be learning about a parable of a sower, but the evil sower as well. I'm not actually sure what the title of this parable is, but it is we're going to be reading this, and Jesus actually explains this parable to us, and then he explains what it means and what it means to follow him versus following the devil. So let's go ahead and get into this, starting there in chapter 13, verse 24. He presented another parable to them. This kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while people were sleeping, his enemy came, sowed weeds among the wheat, and left. When the plant sprouted and produced grain, then the weeds also appeared. The landowner's servants came to him and said, "Master, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Well, then where did these weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he told them. So do you want us to go and pull them up?" the servants asked. He said, "No, when you pull up the weeds, you might also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At harvest time, I'll tell the reapers, 'Gather the weeds first and tie them in bundles and burn them. But collect the wheat into my barn.'" Skipping to verse 36. "Then he said to the crowds and went into the house. Then he left the crowd, sorry. He left the crowds and went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field.'" There's the title of the parable there, the weeds in the field. He replied, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man." He's referring to himself, to Jesus himself. "The field is the world, and the good seed, these are the children of the kingdom." These are those who will believe in Christ, who will follow him. "The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Therefore, just as the weeds are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather from his kingdom all who cause sin and those guilty of lawlessness. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Let anyone who has ears listen or hear." So let's first look at wheat or weeds and look at this divide between the wheat and the weeds. So first, Jesus presents a parable to them, the kingdom of heaven. Sorry, this is verses 24 through 30. He presented another parable, which we said a second ago is an earthly story with a heavenly or spiritual meaning in terms that people of the day would completely understand and get. It's relative to them, relevant rather to them. So he presents this parable to them so to help them understand something. The kingdom of heaven, which is the reign of God, present and future, encompassing God's redemptive work through Christ and fulfilling his rule. So he's saying this is the truth of the kingdom of God. It may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while people were sleeping, his enemy came. So he's already explained to us that is Satan, the very real opponent of God, not just a not just a figurative term or a title for whoever opposes God, but an actual entity named Lucifer, who is a fallen angel, given the title of Satan or deceiver or opponent. We also know as the devil. This is who the enemy is. He sowed weeds among the wheat. Now, if any of you have ever had a flower bed or a garden, you know how annoying and destructive weeds can be to your flower bed. They choke out your good plants. They grow very quickly. They grow most of the time pretty shallow in the soil, so they are easily uprooted, but it's an annoying thing to have to go and pull up. And if you have young plants planted with the weeds, then, like Jesus warns here, you could hurt your flower bed by pulling them too early. And so you have to just kind of deal with it, or you have to try to treat it, or what have you. I know as a teenager, my mom loved to keep her flower beds, and I absolutely hated weeding. And I said a teenager. My mom didn't really have a garden until after I went to college, and she was able to own a home. But I remember the first home that she owned after I went to college, and she would go out not just into her flower bed, but into her St. Augustine yard, and she would get her little knee mat and walk out in the yard and pluck every piece of clover, every piece of crabgrass and dandelion. If she saw it, it was getting yanked out of the ground so that her St. Augustine could take off. And it did. It paid off. She did wonderful work in that yard, aerating it and making sure and taking care of it, making sure that the grass grew nice and green and soft. My brother and I often would chase each other in horseplay out in the front yard of that house, and we're able to roll around on the ground where there is no weeds or stickers or anything like that because my mom took such good care of her lawn. I hated weeding. I would find any other chore to get out of weeding whenever I was at home. I would say, I will go in the attic, I will trim the trees, I will do anything if I don't have to get on my knees and do the tedious task of pulling every weed out of the yard. It was just an insurmountable task for me. I hate doing it in our flower beds. Grace graciously does the weeding of our flower beds. I will mow, I will weed eat, I'll do all the things. I just hate weeding and pulling weeds. It is like pulling teeth, in my opinion, but it's necessary. And so these weeds, they choke out the wheat. It's meant to be a distraction from the harvest. It's supposed to cause strife during the harvest. So he sowed the weeds among the wheat. And it was so common in Rome that this act was so common to do to your opposition, the opposing farmer, your competition, to make their harvest less rather, that Rome actually made a law against it. It was illegal to sow weeds in your neighbor's field. So the landowner's servants came to him, Master, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Then where did these weeds come from? An enemy did this, he told them. So do you want us to go and pull them up? The servants asked. He said, no. When you pull up the weeds, you might also uproot the wheat with them. This was a young wheat plants as well. Let both grow together until the harvest. At the harvest time, I'll tell the reapers, gather the weeds and tie them in bundles and burn them, but collect the wheat in my barn. So he says, no, don't pull them yet. Let them show what they are. Let them grow together. This explains why God allows false believers or believers who say that, or people, I have to correct myself, people who say that they are believers but are actually enemies of the Lord. God allows them to stay. God allows them to remain on earth for this reason, so that they will show what they are at the end times, and that they'll be gathered together, that justice will be enacted, and it's the Lord's justice. It's not just the angels doing what the angels want to do. The workers are the angels. It's not that. It's God, number one, allowing them to stay, and in our case, an enemy can become a member of the fold. This is true for Paul. Paul started off life as a weed, but God, through Christ, supernaturally changed him from a weed into wheat, from a non-believer and an enemy into one of the greatest missionaries ever in the world, in the history of the world. And so God says, let them grow, and at harvest time, or the end times, then we will separate them then. So is it always possible to distinguish sincere believers from insincere believers? And how, if so? I would say it is very hard in most cases. In very few cases, it's very clear. But Jesus does say that by their fruits you will know them. And when he says that, he's referring to false teachers. He's referring to false believers, to people who are insincere, who are only going through Christianity for whatever reason as a means for gain for themselves. And so we need to be on guard and watch the fruit that people do produce, and because that is how we can judge whether or not their faith is true or not. So moving on to our second section, this is verses 36 through 39. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He replied, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man." He's referring to himself, Jesus. "The field is the world, and the good seed, these are the children of the kingdom." These are those who have been saved and justified and sanctified and will be glorified. "The weeds are the children of the evil." These are people who have been led astray by the devil, who they may believe that they are Christians, but their life is never changed. But regardless, they are definitely impersonating Christians, impersonating those who believe, or they are just outright rejecting the kingdom of God. They are there to cause adversity and strife. Those who follow Satan by rejecting the gospel and opposing God's kingdom is how our text describes them in the footnotes. Verse 39, "And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Therefore, just as the weeds are gathered..." Oh, sorry, I read too far. "And the harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels." So why would Satan want to sow weeds in the world? Well, Satan's ultimate goal is to keep people from being redeemed, to keep people from being saved. And so if he can sow discord in the world and in the church, and it causes people to leave the church or fall away from the faith, well, then he's succeeding. And that's what he wants to do. So he gets people, he tempts people, he has people who are following him, or at least they are following a ideology that says the church is the enemy, and therefore they go and they sow discord and they cause division and they cause strife in the church, and they might say, "I am a believer," but their life does not reflect that. These are people who have been led astray by Satan and are actively being enemies of the church. And so Satan wants to do this to keep the church divided, to keep the church distracted from what else he's doing in the world. And so in the church, we have a responsibility. What is our responsibility regarding the weeds sown by the devil? It is to see them, to notice them, and then to reach out to them. It is always possible, if there is breath in the lungs of a man or a woman or a child, there is time for that person to be saved. And so I would say that our responsibility is to see those that are causing discord in the church. If it's a church leader, we should call them out. We should be vocal about it and say, "Hey, this person is causing discord," and we should not be okay with it. We should say something about it. If they are in the church and are church members, then there needs to be some kind of church discipline that therefore could be, provided that this person is not too far gone, to bring that person back into the fold, to bring them back into right relationship with God, or bring them into right relationship with Christ for the first time, even though they might have been saying that they are justified, that they are saved. And then Jesus talks about heaven or hell and this division between heaven and hell. "Therefore, just as the weeds are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. the false believers, the enemies of God will be gathered together at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather from his kingdom all who cause sin and those guilty of lawlessness. They will throw them into the blazing furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Let anyone who has ears listen. Jesus says he's going to separate the weeds from the wheat. He's going to let the wheat survive and shine like the sun, and yet the weeds are going to be gathered together and tossed into the burning furnace, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There will be heartbreak. There will be despair in this moment because of their unbelief. And this is the day of judgment, and this is God's perfect justice winning out. Now, if we find ourselves as enemies of God, and how do we know if we're enemies? Well, if you've never put your faith and trust in God, then you're living a life as an enemy, whether you like it or not. You're not choosing to. You may not be actively going after the church, but by rejecting God's sovereignty, by rejecting God's salvation, by rejecting his authority in your life, you are proving yourself to be an enemy of the Lord. Because the world will tell you you can have all of these different choices. You can make all these different choices, but the reality of the world is it is a dichotomy. It is a one or the other. And it is presented as the weeds and the wheat. It is presented as the small gate versus the wide gate, the narrow path versus the wide, easy path. And we have to choose who we are going to follow. And so I think the book of Joshua says, I don't want to misquote, so I'm going to look it up because I hate misquoting. Joshua as for me. Just want to get the reference right. Joshua 24:14. Yes, Joshua 24:15 says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua is giving a charge to Israel and is saying, choose. You can choose the gods of this land, or you can choose the gods of your ancestors, which is the God of your ancestors, which is, sorry, no, he's not speaking to Israel. Sorry. I just want to make sure I'm accurate and don't miss. Yeah, so Joshua is talking to all of the people. This is all of the people of Israel, including foreigners as well. And he says, now this is verse 14. Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshiped beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. So this is the false gods that your ancestors used to worship, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. And he gives some rhetorical ideas. He gives some sarcastic examples. Whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, he's saying this is the correct choice. We will serve the Lord. And the people answered him, far be it from us to forsake the Lord and serve other gods. It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents out of Egypt from that land of slavery and performed those great signs before our eyes. And they go on to say, we will serve the Lord, for he is our God. And then Joshua talks about holiness for a little bit and says you have to be consecrated, you have to be holy. So we have to make that decision. Are we going to follow God, or are we going to follow the world? Are we going to follow Satan's temptation for us to say we don't need God, we don't need to make this choice, we don't need Jesus's righteousness, we only need what makes us happy or what makes us feel fulfilled, or whatever the world is saying this week. So then our last question is, does knowing there will be a final judgment with eternal consequences bring you comfort or concern? If concerned, then you need to speak to somebody about those concerns. Me, Brother Richard, Brother Ronnie, and about making sure that you have security in that day. For me, for a long time, I was terrified. This is true for a lot of Christians. I felt as a kid, as a child, this is about 6th grade, that I was very good at going through the motions of Christianity. Um, all my friends said that they were Christians, but we were all still cutting up and being vulgar and crass and everything else. And we all said we were Christians, but none of us were acting like it. And again, I'm like 12 years old at this point. And I remember thinking, if I'm acting like all of my friends and we are no different than the rest of the world, then who am I really serving? What am I really following? Do I really believe this God that I say that I do believe in? And I started thinking about that passage in the book of Matthew where Jesus says, on that day, many will say to me, we've looked at this several weeks ago, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy and do great things in your name? And he will say, begone from me, for I never knew you. And I did not want that to be true of myself. So I recommitted my life to Christ. I didn't do any big decision on a Sunday morning or anything. I just made a commitment there to God during my quiet time or Bible study at home that night, and said, God, I don't want to be an unfaithful servant of yours. I want to be the good and faithful servant. I want to make sure that every part of my life is devoted to you and serving you. And of course, I am a human and I have failed at that many times since I was 12 years old. But my goal is to be better than I was yesterday, to be more like Christ today than I was yesterday. And God has blessed my life because of that decision. He has opened doors because of that decision. He has given me my family and my job and everything else because of that decision to follow him in faith and in full commitment to what he wants for my life. That's why when I felt the call to ministry, I did not fight the call to ministry, because I had said at that point 6 years prior, God, I want to be where you want me to be. I want to follow you and my life be yours. I was already a Christian. I'd been a Christian for a couple of years at that point when that happened. And there comes a time where we have to make that decision. Who are we going to choose? God or Satan, heaven or hell? So if you need to make that decision, then you can come and talk to me or Brother Richard or Brother Ronnie, and we will be happy to talk through that decision with you so that you can understand it fully and fully commit to it and understand more, learn more, whatever it is. We're happy to do that. Thank you so much for being with me today. I look forward to worshiping with you very soon. Bye bye.